Brother, are you all right?
No, I am not all right. I just shared a bottle of Kanar with Damar. That rhymes.
You're drunk.
Of course I'm drunk.
And oh boy, yes. If you're not drunk already, you're gonna wanna be for this one. Because holy shit, has the discussions already been going on? And actually, does someone want to get a spoiler alert icon for the screen?
It's a trap!
That works better.
Oh, no. I want people to know that there's a spoiler alert going on. Not immediately, but yes. So, update for everyone out in the audience. Me being the controlling son of a bitch that I am, and actually listening to some of the audience members, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently this week and going forward. We are actually talking multiple topics today. We are actually going to be segmenting this out. Yeah, just send me that file so I can throw it on when we get to that bit of it. So, as anyone may be aware, last episode we got cut off on the review and analysis of Star Trek IV. So here to open the show, we are going to wrap that up, and we are going to do it rather expeditiously. You hear that? We got a time limit, fellas.
Hey, it's always you and Gio who are the ones that are dragging it out. So.
Yes, but if I don't say it to you guys... Well, to be fair, Furball has his moments too.
That is true.
Hey, yeah, that's true. I'm not going to deny that.
So we're going to go from that, and then we have two other topics to hit on. One that should lead into the other. So for those who may not have caught the notice earlier, while the predominant series we will be talking about on this show going forward is still going to remain Star Trek, we are going to be mixing in and adding in other sci-fi franchises as well. And there is quite the topic that we are going to end up talking about later in the show that I think we all could have fun with. And I think we're going to need it after what we talk about in the middle. So, for those who might want to preview and might want to kind of maybe slightly distract yourself until we get done with that wonderful pain in the ass in the middle, we are going to be talking about some of the technological stuff across all sci-fi franchises. Because a question came up. What are the feasibility of cryo-sleep pods, laser weapons, and vehicles that can operate both in space and in atmosphere? That's going to be the fun bit at the end. But before then, we have to keep talking. We have to wrap up what was going on with the nuclear vessels. Which, there's a lot of reference history to that movie.
I wasn't here last time. Could you guys do like a quick 30 to 50 minute wrap up of what you talked about last time?
Yeah, no. How about 30 seconds? We got to the point where they were using the USS Ranger as a stand-in for the USS Enterprise because they didn't know where Alameda was across the bay in Alameda.
In Alameda.
So,
And $100 is a lot of money.
to some. But also, weren't those a gift from Dr. McCoy? Well, that's the beauty of time travel. They will be again. So, and that's the thing. This movie brings up a number of questions about time travel paradoxes. Because let's look at some of the violations that may have been resulting from the actions of the crew in this bit. I mean...
May have been?
Because we don't know for sure. It could have been a predestination paradox. You know, that is kind of a thing. Because what are the chances that the reason why Bones ended up finding those frames of antique glasses for Kirk in the 23rd century is because it did kick off by Kirk being in 1980s San Francisco, selling it to that antiquities dealer? Because
could that mean that those glasses are literally thousands of years old?
almost 1,000 by the time they get to Kirk's hands initially in Star Trek 2, yeah.
I'm just thinking they keep doing loops.
Yeah. Well, because when you think about it, yeah, they could have actually been multiple thousands of years old through that time loop, because they're dated as 18th century, so 1700s. Kirk gets them as a gift in the 23rd century, 500 something years later, but then goes back to 20th century America and exchanges them for some cash. And if they then follow lineage from there back to Bones, which then goes back to Kirk, which then goes back to San Francisco, and kind of nice loop that ends up happening there. But the question is, how long could that loop actually run? Is time a linear progression in any sort of manner?
It's linear and it's toroidal back, and yeah.
Well, no. I think it really can be summed up as, well, a lot of people do think of time as a linear progression of cause to effect, but in actuality, it's a wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey mess. But yeah, so, and then, and after that, you have the other wonderful gem. Hello, computer.
Fine, I'll do it the old-fashioned way.
Just use the keyboard. Keyboard. How quaint. And then he fucking pecks away and gives the guy the molecular formula for transparent aluminum. Now, granted, Scotty's logic is rather sound on this. How do we know he didn't invent the bloody thing?
NANA has a good point. Time travel can't never happen, or be possible.
You never know, because Brian Cox actually did an analysis of how time travel in the Doctor Who universe works. That is actually technically plausible.
Well, it's a double negative there.
Yeah, oh, I know that.
Time travel can't
Never
be possible. So
Yeah.
therefore, time travel is possible.
So, from that, we get another wonderful violation of the Temporal Prime Directive, and after they go, Uhura and Chekhov go in to steal the highly energetic photons from a nuclear reactor, control room of a boiler. In trying to get away, they... Well, here's a question. You beam in at one point with the reactor active and get in fine. Wouldn't you go back to the same location for beam out, not the opposite side of the reactor and closer to it?
Oh, come on now. You expect them to walk the 5 feet back the way they came?
It's probably closer to 10 feet, but yeah, that 5 foot difference between the two could have made the difference between Chekhov getting back and just narrowly being caught, or him actually being caught playing games with what looks to be NCIS, which I don't think it would have been NCIS interrogating him in that room to begin with.
It could have been. It would have been, I think. Because NCIS, well, this is back in the... No, it would have been NIS. NCIS didn't exist then.
Yeah, NIS. But even then, in a major, a spacious control room like that with no guard outside the door or inside at the door, there are some procedural issues there.
And Jared, I'm sorry not to like change topic or anything, but still continuing from our topic from before we came on air. God damn you! I've been doing nothing but googling images, and fuck you.
Told ya.
Ah, damn it. Okay, continue.
So.
God damn it.
But yeah, so Chekhov manages to get away, and now here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize. As of the early 90s, the Marine security contingents were removed from capital ships of the U.S. Navy. Prior to that, your battleships, aircraft carriers, and I want to say the nuclear cruisers as well, the security department aboard ship was staffed by Marines. Because guess what? The Marines, even though they don't like hearing this, they're a part of the Navy. And I love reminding them of that. But
Where's main gun when you need him?
Oh, yeah. Which, so in today's day and age, in the U.S. Navy, the Marines you're going to see aboard ship are one of two things. Come on. Go. Full screen, you bastard. There we go. Are going to be amphibious. You're going to have your MU, your Marine Expeditionary units that are on your Gator freighters, your amphibious transports. But then you also have aviation units that are going to be on the amphibs, as well as there are a couple carrier air wings that have Marine fighter attack squadrons attached to them. As a matter of fact, the last workup deployment that I did on the Stennis, we had a Marine squadron attached to that air wing. So, when you look at what was going on in that scene where Chekhov is trying to run away, and you have to admit, the musical choice in this movie was very, very reminiscent of a TOS episode. You have that intentional dose of comedy that comes from the music. That, oh, he's running away, and look at the crazy shit that's going on around him. And then you have that, like, uplifting tone that is almost going on like, yep, he's got hopes. Gets to the edge of a deck edge elevator and falls off. Now, him surviving that fall is not out of the realm of possibility.
The last I checked, battleships and naval ships are really hard.
Oh, but he fell off of the elevator onto the pier.
Well, wood is so much softer.
Oh, no, this was a concrete pier. Glober Mom, what it looks like is they were actually, if I remember right, they were on the 01 or 02 level, so he would have been just, like, literally a few compartments off from... Actually, no, because the passageway that he went down when he first got out of the room, that long shot, that's up on the 03 level. That is the one deck below the flight deck. And you can get some really trippy pictures on an aircraft carrier when you're up in that area, because it is a long hallway with the portholes for actual those are airtight doors going all the way down, and it's taking up a good 2/3 the length of the ship. in one straight shot. Which is why the airtight doors come in handy for damage control. But so he's up on the O2. Yeah, you just got to get to the nearest ladder, go down 2 levels, and then right outside, you're in the hangar bay. The hangar bay of an aircraft carrier, especially of the Forrestal and Kitty Hawk classes, they are expansive. They are actually very easy to get to, unless you are extreme forward of the ship, which, judging from where they took them from being down in the bowels of the ship in, what would they say, 4 MMR, so that would have been aft, yeah, they would have taken them outboard, straight up, and then inboard to that, office that actually looked like an ops division space. Yeah. Yeah, so now keep in mind, they were using the USS Ranger as a stand-in for the Enterprise. So the spaces that you see on that ship when they're doing the interior shots are actually smaller than they would have been on the Enterprise. Not by much, but noticeably. So his escape progress is feasible. That is legitimate, with the exception of there being no guard inside or outside of the door.
These are only Navy nuclear vessels. It's not like they need to be protected.
In the fucking 80s! Height of the Cold War. Yeah, height of the Cold War. A guy with a Russian accent that you even identify as a Rusky, and such lax security. Now, here's the thing. The communicator and Klingon version of a Type 1 phaser are right there on the table. Why couldn't Scotty beam him out then when he was even further away from the reactor?
Plot.
And that's the bad part, is yes, even in classic Trek, there are glaring plot holes in the way that they wrote the story, but this incident did give us quite the excursion and quite the way to utilize Dr. Jillian there in the hospital. But now we get to another issue with contaminating the timeline.
Oh, you mean McCoy saving a woman miraculously that should be dead?
Yeah, Bones, I love you, but holy shit, are you the worst time traveler in Trek history?
But he's a great doctor. What doctor wouldn't do everything they can to save a patient, regardless of the timeline?
True. And keep in mind, this isn't the first time that Bones fucked with the timeline. City on the Edge of Tomorrow, anyone?
Well, don't forget, he also gets into a nice little argument with the surgeon about the fundoscopic examination.
This is true. And the quip before that on the way up, where they're talking about the cancer treatments and the early stages of it. And he referred to it as barbarism. So he should have been going in there being well expecting them to quite literally drill holes in his head. Because guess what? Even still today, if there is a massive bleeding inside the skull that is putting pressure on the brain, what is the first step that doctors are going to do? They need to relieve the pressure. But so they end up getting in there. Now, miraculous, well, it can kind of make sense because that phaser didn't go near an active nuclear reactor, which I'm not sure how that would actually end up causing the interference to prevent the other one from working. Maybe it was just a crap phaser that they didn't test before they went out on the mission. Shocking. Kirk locks up the medical crew, and the guards outside even acknowledge, but you went in there with a woman that is standing next to the gurney as they're walking out. And that doesn't clue them off right then. They have to go inside, see that the surgical crew is literally locked in the surgical closet off of the OR, and then they realize, hey, maybe we should run after these assholes.
Come on now. You should know better.
Oh, and what about this one? They had portable two-way radios back then, too. Why did those two asshats have to be the ones to run after them through the entire hospital? Guess what? Hospitals back then still had a security contingent. But then again, we wouldn't have gotten such another wonderful use of that lightly and lithely music that they played.
Music. That campy music.
Which... you know what? I am giving the music choice shit right now, but it's some of my favorite music from the original series movies of Star Trek. That and Star Trek 2.
That I just gotta say, so this whole plot line is one of the silliest, campiest, honestly doesn't make sense to anyone who has logical thinking, but it's a fun movie.
It was, and for as much of a hard time as we can give it, like the whole thing about how Jillian jumps in right after the transporter beam is initiated and somehow doesn't have any ill effects. I mean, there are bits and pieces to this that really make you scratch your head, but again, overall, it is an enjoyable movie. It is subjectively one of it, and according to some people, the best Star Trek movie of the original series crew. And with
I was going to say, at least it's not Star Trek 5.
Oh, that's gonna hurt in 2 weeks.
You almost can't even judge this one based upon the other movies, because it doesn't have a overarching plot line. It doesn't have anything that's deep in the lore. It is a standalone good time.
Okay. So keep in mind, when did Star Trek 4 come out?
86?
84.
4? Okay.
And when you look at what other movies were coming out around that same time, what was in the theaters just before that? That was also a part 3.
I don't know.
Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, Return of the Jedi, yeah.
So you have the Star Wars franchise as it was understood at that time being wrapped up, and that was, again, another enjoyable action interlaced type of movie, so you can kind of see where Trek wanted to go towards that. But at the same time, keep in mind, if you watch Star Trek 2, it goes right into Star Trek 3, which goes right into Star Trek 4. It is a direct continuation. So to go from the seriousness and the battering that was experienced by the crew and ship in Star Trek 2, followed on by the grief and ramifications and beginning of corrections in Star Trek 3, having a lighthearted, campy thing to wrap it up, and while also still having that whole, hey, there's a giant fucking space penis about to literally fuck the shit out of Earth.
Meow. Meow. Meow.
Oh, 4 was 86? Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you still have... I remember, I was young. I never... Star Trek 4 and below, I didn't see in theaters. I'm too fucking young for that shit. I didn't watch them until
this one in theater.
The first one I remember seeing in theaters was actually Generations. Because I remember actually annoying my grandparents when Star Trek 6 was released on VHS. It was rented for a significant amount of time 1 year when I was spending the summer with my grandparents in Michigan. And yeah.
Anybody
Yep.
can tell me something that's wrong with this picture here?
Who's the boy in the middle?
Why?
I have no clue why this is
How
here.
the hell did that get in there?
I have no clue. I just thought you guys would enjoy it.
Wow. So, you do have a good wrap up and continuation of that overarching story between the three, and it did make for an enjoyable, again, bit of comedic. Definitely gave the feel of an episode of Star Trek done well as a full feature length movie. Because you have to admit, Star Trek 1 felt like a 2.5, almost 3 hour movie. Star Trek 5 felt like a 2 hour movie. But, well, even 3 at times felt like it dragged on. But 2, 4, and 6 actually had good pacing to it. Actually have that enjoyment factor of it doesn't feel like it's dragging on. So it, and then the whole thing of, hey, you broke all these rules and regulations, and yes, you saved the Earth by breaking all the rules and regulations. We understand that, yes, you have to be punished, but we actually recognize the culprit in this, the primary cause of this. Sorry, Kirk, it was you. So I agree and understand with the absolving of the charges against Uhura, Scotty, Chekhov, and Sulu. And there were no charges against Spock. He was quite literally a victim of everything.
He was a bit of a vegetable.
Yeah, a little bit. And so you can see where, okay, drop all the charges from the lower crew. But, why would you demote someone from being an admiral and then immediately give him the command of his own fucking ship? Exactly, Techatron. It was a punishment in name only. If anything, it is the reason why. It is the impetus for, in Generations, when Kirk tells Picard, don't let him transfer you, don't let him promote you, don't let him do anything that
To get
takes
you off that bridge.
Yeah. Because Kirk realized that if you are that well suited for that position, you do not accept promotion because you're gonna miss it. Which this actually goes right into one of the talking points that I will give Picard, the series Star Trek Picard, some positive points. There has been some things that they have actually done appropriately. So now that we're getting into this bit, where did I save that image?
One quick thing, I can't share screen,
you a
so
different
Jay,
one.
if you could share this, if we could cross-platform 2 different programs, this is who would be showing up midway through episode or the 4th movie.
Oh god. I hope.
Am I wrong?
I hope. No, you're not wrong. I'm just hoping Jared doesn't mind losing monetization.
Oh, I've already said it with massive space penis.
Well, this
this
is
is
quite
gonna be-
tangible.
Oh god, imagine those guys in Trek.
They would have shown up halfway through this movie and smacked the shit out of everyone.
No, you don't say. But in the meantime, yes, we are now talking about the latest Star Trek series. So yeah.
I sent you a better one, actually, Jared.
Oh no, this one works. This one works. So,
But the one I sent was more themed.
ooh, okay, yeah.
Oh shit!
So,
I've got like 5 tabs open that I was going to share once we get to that plot point, and for some reason I can't screen share.
why is your screen share not working?
Present now, and let me see if I can. Yeah, you must grant permissions in order to screen share, and I
Well-
don't know where to grant permissions.
Oh, you're on your Mac, aren't you?
Yes.
You can go fuck yourself.
PC Master Race.
PC masturbate? What?
There, let's get rid of that. Yep, remove that one. We will keep this one. And actually, it fits quite nicely right there, too. There we go. All right. So, yes, Star Trek Picard as a series. As for those who are unaware, I went into it with 50-50 hopes. I went into it expecting it to suck and expecting it to be shit. And I also had the hope of them doing things right. I will be surprised. And some of you might...
That depends on what your definition of right is. I think they just violated that.
Hang on. The pilot episode, the song at the beginning of it, I think was handled masterfully. Because the song that is being sung at the beginning of that dream sequence to start the series is being sung by Bing Crosby, who is a relation of Denise Crosby, who played Tasha Yar. And the song that is being sung is the song that Data sang at Riker and Troy's wedding in Nemesis. So you do have a tie in there that is done appropriately, is done tastefully. And then you have nods done correctly, like when Picard pulls out the comm badge from his desk in his study.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good nod there. And then the references and the tie-in to Lieutenant Commander Maddox, which is a throwback to Measure of a Man.
Yep.
And also a couple references later where in TNG they actually had in an episode established where, despite that fuckery, Data and Maddox actually did end up establishing some sort of friendship. So there are little nods here and there that are done appropriately. Such as there is an instance where Picard finally shows up to Starfleet Command, and it pans up to a rotating holographic display of certain ships of the line. And they showed the Enterprise D, which is what Picard really is most known for, the Galaxy class. But then you have problems. And one of them...
Do you want to deal with this first, or do you want to go through
Yes.
the plot of the show first?
Let's deal with this one first, because I think this leads right into the issues with the plot and other aspects on how they're handling the series and how I think they're getting it wrong and where they are making mistakes or have made mistakes at this point. So, before you see the Enterprise D, you see a different ship. A very significant ship. A, dare I say, deity of a ship in Star Trek.
Now,
Oh,
before you
no,
go there,
wait.
we need a history first, a history of literal Star Trek lore, and the bifurcation of timelines.
And that's where we're getting into this, because I have it up there. Sorry. Hashtag not my Enterprise.
So, in 2009, with the re-release of the Calvin series, and I thought this was an innovative way to reboot the series. So if anybody hasn't watched that or didn't catch what was going on, they start a new timeline.
Yep.
So the Calvin series is not Next Generation, is not Voyager, is not any of the other series from that time frame. They changed the timeline. That way they got a blank slate to write what they want. So the question has been with Star Trek Discovery, is it the Calvin timeline or is it the original series timeline? And
Kelvin
that one
timeline.
came to be the Calvin timeline. So we are
Kelvin.
not talking the original Kirk. We are not talking the original Picard. It is different. And then the big question here was, is Picard the original timeline or the Calvin timeline? And in this episode, they tipped their hand.
Oh, they tipped their hand, and they tipped it to a third player. Because keep in mind, you have the 3 timeline proposition right now. So right now, this version of the Enterprise is your true prime original timeline. This one here, the classic one from Trek, the original series, the one that is referenced to with the refit or rebuild in the motion picture, which then leads into the Excelsior class and the foundations of the Next Generation, DS9, and Voyager that we have come to know. However, this is the Kelvinverse. That is one offshoot. One. Keep in mind, there is a proposition of there being another offshoot timeline, which involves Star Trek Enterprise and Discovery.
Where is the split in Enterprise?
The split is
First Contact.
The split is Star Trek Enterprise. It is First Contact, where the Enterprise E goes back in time to deal with the Borg. That is the divergence point for this third timeline, which is what gives us Enterprise with Archer in the NX-01, which is what gives us Discovery, because keep in mind, in Enterprise, they had already been made aware of the Borg because of the remnants that crashed at the poles as a result from the First Contact movie. So going off that, you do have a logical explanation for Picard, Discovery, and Enterprise being its own separate timeline.
So Calvin wasn't the beginning.
Kelvin was the beginning of a different timeline. So
And
now
a third timeline.
Yeah, so now we're dealing with 3, not 2. So you have the original prime, which goes up into First Contact on the movies and the TV series prior to that in that timeline from TOS, the animated series, TNG, DS9, Voyager, and then the TNG crewed movies. Those are all part of the Prime Universe timeline. You have the Hobus event, which takes place, which is the divergence point that goes back to the birth of James T. Kirk and creates that timeline that is known as the Kelvin timeline or the JJ verse. Then you have a third timeline that's generation is the travel back in time of the Enterprise E back to the time of First Contact before that, which is what gives you that third concurrently running arc that you could say, which would explain away why you have such a difference with the ships in Discovery, which is why you have such a difference with the original 1701 Enterprise that we have now seen on screen in Picard and also in Discovery. It would also explain why some of the technology that is there and utilized in Star Trek Enterprise is there in the way that it is. It would give a reason to not be as nitpicky with Discovery and Picard as a result, because guess what? They're not in the Prime Universe. Full stop.
And it would also, it would explain why. So if Borg was known at the time of Trek 09, that would explain why their bridge is so much more advanced than the original Kirk.
Yep. Again, plausible explanation. And guess what, CBS? You could have just fucking explained it and had it been known to be that way from the beginning. And how many people, while would still be grumbling, would be less critical of it?
So now step into this episode of Picard where we are given an image of that timeline's Enterprise.
Yeah, and just so people can see it again. Now, granted, this is from episode 2 of the series where Picard is going to Starfleet Command to try to get some assistance. Try to pull a Kirk, as you could say. Where he even said in his meeting with the Commander-in-Chief of Starfleet that I'll even take a demotion to Captain.
Now, if you compare that with the different versions of the Enterprise, that is not the Kirk Enterprise.
No.
And the significant thing about it are the pylons connecting the nacelles, where you have a split in the pylons, which has never been seen in any Enterprise before Kelvin.
Yeah, and when you look at the shape is a hybrid between the original and the refit, where you have the straight connection from secondary hull to nacelle that you do with the original series, but those were a straight rectangular pylon, whereas you do get a bit of that reverse tapering angle from the refit. But again, you have the slits in there. You have, and not just that, look also at the back of the saucer section. You also have the wider impulse drive area that you see in the Discovery one. There is no doubt that Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard, as confirmed by what is on screen, take place in the same universe. And
the question then would be, is that the Kelvin universe or the post First Contact universe?
With the
that would be the post.
Yeah, it's post First Contact. Kelvin is entirely offshoot on its own.
Is that officially dead?
In canon aspect, maybe. Because there has been talk of them doing the 4th movie, and it has been gaining traction again. Number of the actors are signed on to the project again, but...
And apparently the writer's being told that he should rewrite Star Trek for the search for... or not, the Voyage Home. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where I clicked the video link and played that for a little bit on that one I showed you from IMDb.
LRJ88, are there different timelines in the mirror universe as well, or do they follow the real universe one for one? I would say...
Does that split all
yes.
universes?
Well, keep in mind, so this actually does touch on the multiverse theorem that I actually am a proponent of. From my understanding of it so far, to me it's plausible because think about it this way. For every individual apparent choice that you have, where you can go any number of ways, every individual option and potential outcome from that decision point is the fracturing point of different realities.
I think somebody's throwing down the gauntlet, Jared.
Oh. Enjoy the name. I'm not reading it aloud, but I would have to say, yeah, you're not just wrong, you're fractally wrong. And we are about to get into why. Because the only other thing so far that I can speak kindly of for Star Trek Picard is one thing.
Number one?
No. I actually getting to see the uniforms on screen in their full glory so far. Good choice. Nice, nice upgrade. You get a golf clap for that one, CBS. You didn't completely fuck up the costume department.
See,
They tried, though.
I'm not a hater of Picard quite yet. I'm warming up to it because I'm kind of viewing it as a fresh start for a new generation, that this isn't your grandpa's Star Trek.
You know, I get that because this is post-Dominion War. This is post a lot of fuckery type shit. But, this is where we start really dissecting it, because do writers in Hollywood today know how to write a female character that isn't a fucking Mary Sue?
No.
Is she truly a Mary Sue, though? Because, I mean, she's sleeping with the enemy.
Oh no, I'm not talking about the twin sister at this point yet. I'm talking just what has been shown on screen in episodes 1 and 2 so far. She is literally being attacked by an elite Romulan death crew. And holy shit, are there some fucking dumb decisions with what they do there. But in addition to that, oh hey, she's not activated yet. She might be activated yet. Knock her out. And instead of knocking her out, what does he do? Puts a bag
over her head.
Yeah, just puts a fucking bag over her head.
And then tries to knock her out, and
then she kicks the ever-loving shit out of him. But
she did incinerate.
Yeah, after he projectile vomited acid all over her.
Which I will say,
that was a Romulan thing.
Oh, well, if you actually go back and look, you can see. Okay.
I think it's a tooth thing, like cyanide.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, you definitely see a chomp and then the spit. But but here's the problem with it: when you're watching it the first time, you can easily miss that chomp. I didn't clearly see it until the second time when I was fucking looking for the detail. So
I noticed it.
Well, and it's one of those things that if something can be easily missed like that, you have a problem in the editing department. And speaking of the fucking editing, when did CBS decide to hire J.J. Abrams and his Bad Robot Company to do the visual effects and editing of this series?
You mean copy other editing and effects from different series?
And all the lens flares, the jump cuts, and speaking of jumps, how the fuck can an organic human jump that fucking far?
But she's not an organic human.
No, she's an organic synthetic, which what the fuck does that even mean? Because if she does not medically register as anything other than human, how the fuck can she act like Wolverine? That's who they fucking stole it from. She's fucking Wolverine without the claws.
So she's Yuriko.
Yeah, Yuriko without
Although
the
Yuriko did
adamant.
have claws.
Well, more spikes, and weren't they from the fingertips, not the knuckles?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the plot line so far? So we recently discovered that we have not just the Gestapo of the Romulans, but the Gestapo's Gestapo that nobody's heard of until now, and they're terrified of it.
Oh, the dark secret of the Tal Shiar that even the
they're like the KGB of the KGB.
Yeah. Oh, that is a great question from the chat. There's a plot?
It's only 2 episodes in. I'm holding out hope that the plot holds true, but I'm still pissed off about the timeline.
Now, I will...
Unless they positively tie it to First Contact.
Yeah. Well, looking at the storyline that they are trying to craft. Okay, I get it. Data was a painter, and you have that aspect of it. The facet of Maddox going mad scientist.
That's plausible.
Plausible, okay. But being able to recreate a massive amount of Data's knowledge set from a single fucking positronic neuron?
That's a stretch. That's almost as stretchy and insane as using a giant tardigrade to pilot your ship.
And then say that you didn't steal it from another creator who had made a game almost 10 years prior.
He didn't use tardigrades, though, did he?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
It was a giant blue tardigrade. And when you look at the main cast, when you look at the main cast of characters from that game and compare it to Discovery, change the names only. And even then, not much.
Did he win that lawsuit?
It is still pending. Anas has not. The lawsuit is still in progress.
Yeah, I'm holding hope that they pull this together and it doesn't get too convoluted, because the introduction of a new super secret spy agency, it adds things that don't need to be there to try and tell the story.
My problem isn't so much that, because I can see it, because it's essentially the Romulan version of Section 31.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. It's... That, I have less issue with that. I have more issue of, if that really is the crew that was sent to do all this shit, that fight scene outside of the Anaheim Convention Center, I mean, outside of Starfleet Command and Archives, why would you keep transporting down more troops and more cannon fodder instead of teleporting the fucking target herself?
Well, she was able to cloak herself from his security cameras, so I mean, come on.
No.
Well, she didn't cloak. They were removed from it because the fighters were removed too.
Oh, yeah, on the video feeds, the only thing that was left was Picard.
And the random explosion.
No, well, the feed that he got, but even then, the other feeds didn't have the explosion. And here's another thing. Picard is 90-something years old. That close to an explosion that sends him flying back. How far?
40 feet or so, I guess.
And he's just knocked out.
Hey, how old was Scotty when he died? How old was McCoy when he died?
But how many of them were standing next to major fucking explosions?
McCoy had a pill that cured cancer.
Still.
Sorry, I just looked over into the chat and saw that.
Yeah, technically, we never did see Scotty die.
No, we didn't. We just know, and technically he wasn't that old because he was in stasis. McCoy, on the other hand,
was 130 something, and he fucking looked it.
Tom. Now, come on. You forgetting about Lol?
Lol was a thing. Lol, Data did have a daughter, not Daj, not the twins, but he did have Lol.
Scotty is still alive and captain of a ship.
That ship blew up, letting the Enterprise get out of the Dyson sphere.
In homage to the old man, I would like to think that he is still out there piloting. Not necessarily piloting, but keeping a ship flying.
True.
I would like to think that too.
With
So what about the Spock lookalike as a Romulan?
can they make
Or the Discovery Spock lookalike, I should say.
Can they make blatant spy and double agent not be so blatantly spy and double agent?
You figured out he was a double agent 30 seconds into his introduction.
Just the demeanor of the character is screaming, "I'm gonna screw you over," and not in the fun way that happens in the next episode.
I'm gonna screw you over in the fun way and the not fun way.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all you have to say is yeah.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see where they go with the plot thread as related to Maddox and trying to essentially recreate Data and pretty much continue work that Dr. Noonien Singh started.
Holy shit, I actually agree with Multi Tom Tom on something. Star Trek should move forward, not backwards, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. But here's the thing.
You have to reference backwards.
Well,
otherwise you're going to lose your base.
Oh, yes, no.
Well, you have to have some sort of consistency and some sort of continuing threads that actually fit, that actually make sense with a fandom that has been around as long as it has, that has been paying attention for as much as it has. And that is part of the problem here, is that this is where Picard gets a check mark in the positive that Discovery didn't. You are getting the nods to the nostalgia that are appropriate. Having it be Maddox as the one trying to pick up the mantle and essentially recreate Data makes sense, because Maddox was fucking obsessed with it.
Just a little bit.
You have the time in the archive with the storage and the bits and pieces that Picard has kept in, that is shown there. Again, another good nod. You have models of the Stargazer, the Enterprise E, the Enterprise D was in there in the room. You also had the Cousteau, the captain's yacht from the E, which actually was used and shown on screen. You have the banner from Picard's day at the end of TNG. You have these wonderful little nods and homages here and there. But then you get other writing and editing aspects that are why so many people are critical of Discovery and CBS's handling of the IP over the past few years. So while they made progress in one area, they're still massively screwing the pooch in another.
Oh, yeah.
So if, in the end, looking forward, if we find Maddox and he recreates Data as a whole, what are your thoughts on that?
There's one way I could see him doing it, and only one way. There's a character that the chat... What the fuck has happened with YouTube now?
Buffering?
Yeah, because OBS isn't putting anything out because YouTube wasn't accepting shit.
So how long has it been going?
Hang on.
Oh, are we back?
Hang on.
The Tal Shiar are onto us. Nice one, Furball.
No, I think it's section 31 at this point that was onto us. But so...
Now we're back.
So the question was asked, if the series Picard does bring back Data, I would only be accepting of it if they do it in one way. And there is a character that was already mentioned in the chat that has yet to be mentioned or referenced. That would be the only plausible way to do it. Lore.
So are we going to imprint Data's neural net onto lore?
That is the methodology that I could see that would make the most sense. And also, here's projecting out a storyline I could actually see him doing with, and I would not be upset with. They do that. Maddox is stupid enough to have tried that. And it was that combination of Data and lore that was actually behind the impetus for the attack on Utopia Planitia that was implemented by the poor copies of B4.
Is my thought process is, if they bring back Data as a whole in any way, is that nothing more than placating to their audience rather than being realistic to their internal consistencies?
I say no, because to me, it would depend on how they do it. If they do it in a manner that, like I just laid out, of a way to close up and culminate and then end the storyline with lore as well, and make that be why the attack on Mars happened in the way that it did, I can be accepting of it in that way. Because, again, it would be internally consistent to the series for the way lore actually would have been. It would have given reason for the ability to reemerge Data. But at the same time, I don't see them doing that, because I have so much of a lack of trust in the writers to actually do anything reasonable or appropriate in that way.
I think S2000 GT has a good point about B4. B4 will be reactivated and become a flat earther.
Multi-Tom-Tom is B4. I'm not going to hate the series.
I booted him
until
because he said he wouldn't be respectful and polite. So
yeah,
he clearly
as soon
said
as he
no.
comes back, as long as he's respectful and polite and doesn't tell people to shut up.
Yeah.
For an opinion, you're welcome here. Regardless of your beliefs in science or the shape of the Earth, you are welcome here as long as you're respectful and polite.
Same goes for everyone.
Causes.
Who did?
Data's mother, the most advanced android.
Oh yeah, because it was actually programmed in the aging and everything that if she ever found out that she was an android, her system would catastrophically shut down to begin with. I'm trying to remember. Did that character, when they came aboard, was it by transporter or shuttlecraft?
I don't remember. Which season was that? That was like 3 or 4, wasn't it?
Crystalline Entity. When was Descent? Because it was before Descent. The 2-parter that ended. That was what, 5 into 6? So yeah, it was probably season 4. Or maybe even earlier in oh, wait, she was season 7? For some reason I remember that being earlier, or... Yeah, because you do have a plausible in-universe explanation there with it being... well, yeah, you can consider Data's mom. if they came over by shuttle, it would explain why it didn't get picked up, that she was an android. But at the same time, if they came over by transporter, you could have the beginnings there of the organic appearing and detecting style of an android, which then would better fit into the storyline that Star Trek Picard is trying to go with now. The whole thing of making an android so realistic and from actual biological material, but still has the advanced capabilities of an android. Now, I could see that working from an intellectual standpoint, and maybe even a reflex standpoint to a certain extent, but not strength, not endurance, because you are going to have physical, biological limitations in those areas.
The Dr. K. Lamar?
710.
710? Okay.
Yeah, season 7, episode 10. So, that is something to follow up on, and that's where the series of Picard so far has not been a horrendous miss, but it has left a lot to be desired. There is actually editing and staging issues, if you really want to nitpick, that are kind of laughable. As a matter of fact, in one of the, in my opinion, better reviews of episode 2 by itself that I find entertaining, when you look at episode 2, it was like an episode of CSI with no intelligence. Is a lot of exposition, a lot of telling instead of showing. They definitely have had storytelling issues. Both in Discovery and this. It's the writer's credo is supposed to be show, don't tell. Whereas these writers are doing a lot of telling and very little showing.
So yeah, you don't actually see her come aboard the ship. She's already there in the
Yeah. So you have some plausibility for the type of synthetic bits that Yar was a lieutenant.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah,
She came on as ensign. I didn't remember her getting promoted.
No, Yar was...
She was lieutenant.
She was lieutenant the entire season.
No, she was an ensign, I swear.
No.
No, she was a lieutenant.
When you look at it, the only people on TNG that actually got promoted is Troy, Worf, Geordi, and Wesley of your main characters.
Yeah, wow.
I mean, it's not like on Voyager where even after 7 years, Harry Kim was still an ensign.
Yeah. The forever ensign.
Yeah, although eventually he jumps up to captain of a Nova class ship. But
now I'd like to point out quick, multi-tom-tom, if you're going to be offensive, at least be offensive politely, like LRJ88 just did. Shut up, Wesley. Would have been fine.
Well, yeah, and Geordi definitely fast-tracked compared to the others, but that's kind of a benefit of the position of being the chief engineer, or being tagged as the chief engineer of the flagship of Starfleet at that point.
I would like to compare the experience and timelines of Ensign Forever Harry Kim, 7 years in the Delta Quadrant and can't get promoted, but trainee in recruit Kirk in the Kelvin timeline makes captain in like 2 years and they give him a ship.
He made captain before he even officially graduated.
How the hell is that possible?
It's not.
It's because because Admiral Pike decided to promote him to acting first officer, and then when Spock decides that, or gets convinced that he is unfit for duty, that makes Kirk captain at that point, even though he had no business being on Enterprise at all to begin with, other than being
Hey.
given the Lavodian mud flea flu, whatever it is.
The mud
Hey,
flea vaccine, which
Yeah,
gives...
Glober Mom. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So say, Glober Mom, you left out recommissioning before the promote.
Yeah.
Because he was in prison. You went from prisoner, inmate Paris to Lieutenant Paris to
LR and
Ensign
J80,
Paris.
it's got the story of Harry down pretty good.
Yeah, the original Harry would have been promoted. They were just hating on him for not being the right one. But shouldn't they have also then been just as critical of Naomi Wildman?
How could you say no? How could you say no to a baby face with little spikes coming out of her head?
Well, at first, when you said
And-
babyface, I thought you were talking about Kim.
And couldn't they have posthumously promoted their Harry after death and just given it to the fake Harry?
No,
Well, was it
that would have been a
really...
slap in the face to their Harry.
Was it really a fake Harry, though?
An alternate Harry.
Oh,
Technically, she did get promoted because she was able to get a field commission.
Well, so Naomi Wildman did become the captain's assistant.
How come O'Brien wasn't Starfleet and just like a contractor? He was Chief O'Brien.
Yeah, he was chief. He was a senior enlisted, which that actually is an interesting thing of how they handled the rank insignia of the enlisted in that manner. Going from your crewman to senior enlisted. Because I will actually give the TNG era this. Your senior enlisted, your chiefs, same uniform as the officers. But not in TOS.
Yeah. TOS uniforms were just janky to begin with.
Well,
There was little internal consistency for logic.
well, I'm also thinking like the Wrath of Khan, the classic, arguably one of the best uniforms that they've had. And actually one of the longest standing ones.
All right, let's
Because
see
we
here.
have functioning memories?
So, S2000 GT, was he like an NCO? Well, I would
Senior
think he would be an
NCO.
NCO. Did they have warrant officers in Starfleet?
Not on screen that they talked about. They only had the enlisted and commissioned officers.
Yeah, so he was a senior NCO.
Yeah.
Which in the Navy is a chief.
Yep.
Oh, apparently they did, according to some source here.
But with all of that, when you really look at everything in universe, you definitely do have some wonderful questions. Yeah, so those are the DS9 ones.
Yep.
But even then, in DS9 is actually when some of the changes took place, because when O'Brien got to DS9, what they had there as the warrant officer rank insignia, the black pip, that was the rank insignia he wore.
Yeah.
Yeah, they might have. Oh, and speaking of that was actually another thing that that Picard actually did right in a way. You have references to the Ferengi Alliance visually in in episode 1, as well as Cassidy Yates shipping. Again, got to be an eagle eye to catch some of the nods that they're doing, but the storyline has glaring issues because why? A lot of the decisions that they have written in that the Romulan Death Troop were making was just ridiculous. Bar none, ridiculous. The only thing I think that is actually acceptable is the suicide pill, which you could then share with your enemy in a way. Which at first is like, wait a minute, since when did Romulans crossbreed with a xenomorph?
You don't know what they do at night.
You know, with although the storyline that they're pushing is that Romulans are so species centric. They are, for lack of a better term, they are so racist for their own vices that they
are xenophobes.
Yeah, that not kinda. They're xenophobe-like because they still interact with other species. A true, complete xenophobic race wouldn't even do that, and we have seen instances of that in Trek, where they don't want to deal with any outside influence at all. They're aware of them. They just shut the door and then have booby traps set up to royally mess up anyone who tries to get by it. But with everything there, I'm wondering what plausible reason they could give for the aversion to artificial intelligence. Which...
Check Discord.
There it is. That is an interesting one. And actually, you know what? Go ahead and pull that one up, because there is something visible there that does lead to my view of an issue in Picard. So here we see a Romulan foreman at a salvage site of a Borg cube, for lack of a better term. What do you notice that sticks out as the identifying difference between a Vulcan and a Romulan?
Besides the Kyle Curtis haircut?
Well, yeah, that wow. It's the forehead. The forehead is more pronounced and more clearly defined on the Romulans than they are the Vulcans. The Vulcans have little hints of it, of the formations that give the lines of the eyebrows more than their Vulcan counterparts. But holy shit, are they inconsistent as fuck about it.
Oh, yeah. Let me, up forward a little bit here. I can get Romeo here.
And why would a Romulan Tal Shiar agent have a British accent? This is one that I have to give to Lord Burns, because on Thursday evenings, we've been doing a viewing party on the Discord server for the episodes as I get my hands on them. And in the most recent episode, Burns was commenting about the accent of Picard's female Romulan aide. And ever
Right.
since he mentioned it, I can't help but hear it, and it is bothersome, to say the least.
God, this guy's a goofy looking motherfucker. Is that work calling you now?
That is the work phone. And it's a number I don't recognize, so give me one moment.
Oh,
That's
so
the
I have to
Ignore
carry
on
the show.
Saturday's phone. Oh, did Multi Tom Tom tell Dora to shut up again?
We warned him.
Yeah, just be polite.
It's not
We
hard.
didn't even. Yeah, we didn't even boot you when you started doing flat Earth stuff.
Well, that's because we're proving that the flat Earth B4 is actually multi Tom Tom.
It's true. It's true.
So what do you think? Am I right? The Kyle Curtis haircut?
We found a new way to do my sight work.
That is. He's a little more clean shaven on the sides.
Oh, and even then, yeah, it would explain why we haven't gotten responses from Kyle.
Now, is that a $15 uniform though?
Now it looks more like 25.
And how does he get those eyebrows done? He's got to either get those waxed or plucked.
Or both.
No, that's definitely a pluck job. Because if you're putting that sort of effort into your appearance, you're not going to risk it. You're going to be fine detailed. And, oh, the creep factor.
Couldn't it be more obvious? Now, I did get a chuckle out of the workplace safety sign.
I did, which actually, we've done the math on how long that Borg cube has been in the hands of the Romulans. And it has been just under 16 years.
Wow.
So at least 16 Earth years. So it is actually 1 day shy of 16 years when you factor in leap year.
Is that in possession of the cube or since the last assimilation?
Since the last assimilation, which you figure they've had access to the cube prior to that as well. The question is how long. But it has been in Romulan hands for at least the last 16 years. So the Romulans were there aboard that cube for a significant amount of time. Because this takes place, 10 years after the Hobus event?
Yes, 10 years after Hobus.
And so they had this for over 6 years prior to that. But even then, that actually is a main impetus that people have given for why the technology and visuals of these series have changed, is because you have that time travel event of the Borg going back to the time of first contact. And does explain what, and does give a plausible reason why Enterprise would have looked different in the actual series Star Trek Enterprise, and then following through from there to Discovery, and then here, because I'm not sure if you guys have spotted it already, but if you look at the transports and shuttlecraft that are shown in Picard, pretty much the same digital assets as the one from Discovery.
Yeah.
Yeah, and LRJ88 asked the question, how many things are supposed to have happened the same way through this in the prime timeline? It makes no sense that so many things are shown. I don't know. If you had, depending on the severity of the event, and remember, that change isn't galaxy-wide, so all of the forward motion of individual beings will continue in the general same direction with minor nudges from that event. So I still think a lot of things would continue the same direction, just not the exact same way. which is kind of how they're writing it.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is you can have subtle changes that don't ripple out too far. You can have similarities, and again, that whole decision point thing. You can have one decision lead to catastrophic change, or you can have subtle changes that result in negligible change. I guess that just goes into how do you measure the importance of a decision or not? You never really know. But yes, Ugly German Truce, there's a lot that they're trying to bring back. But with this influx of the Borg technology and everything, and the loop that has been established, how much of tech that has been shown in not just the Trek side of things, but in sci-fi in general, have actually spurred actual scientific endeavors and developments. And there are some rather notable ones that people have pointed to appropriately, at least for the Star Trek influence, like Bluetooth, cell phones, and even the iPad, the data pads, and stuff like that.
I mean, hell, even with your home assistants, you now basically have the equivalent of being able to page somebody over anything now, like on the Enterprise and stuff.
Yeah.
Enterprise D and everything.
But then you also have the cryogenics, which do span outside of the Trek universe as well. Your sleeper style ships, your sub-light speed long haul travel, which really good.
Rather funny you bring this up because I was literally just watching this morning YouTube Star Wars Reading Club, and it says Legends history of the Star Wars universe of the Old Republic. Basically everything from the creation of the Star Wars universe up to the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking about the sleeper ships that they used to use from Coruscant and Corellia.
Well, yeah, because you figure prior to the advent of FTL, faster than light travel, that is going to be your main way to go unless you went with a generational ship, kind of like Battlestar Galactica, which even then, they still had jump technology. They still had a form of FTL to get around. And part of that in sci-fi, I will actually say, is it really is a plot device. FTL travel started out as a manner of being able to tell a story at a reasonable pace and yet physically expand the reach of where you can in universe go with what you're creating. That is actually something that ends up being crucial. Like, even let's go into the fantasy realm. Let's look at Lord of the Rings. When you look at the movies, the travel between places is all done by foot and horseback. And the way the movies play it off is if it is a around the corner type of travel. You don't always get a sense of it taking multiple days unless there is something relevant to the plot and story that takes place overnight, or even just some little interaction and character building overnight. And yet, when you read the books, the actual trilogy that is the Lord of the Rings saga took multiple years.
Yeah.
It was like 19 months.
It was even longer than that, because
I think the movie said it was 19 months.
The movie did. But when you look at even references back to the original journey that Bilbo went on, he was gone for years, which is why they thought he was dead. And same thing with Frodo. He was gone for such an extended period of time, and he even wasn't even sure if he was going to make it back, so he had done some preparations beforehand. And you have, by book, you have ways of having that length of time it takes for storytelling to not be an issue. And especially when you're getting into sci-fi and fantasy realms, you can get creative with what's actually done. And in sci-fi, I think it goes back into the 50s, where the whole hibernation aspect really came into play and spawned off, because there was a saying aboard ship on each of the cruises that I've gone on for months at a time. The more you snooze, the less you cruise. So when you're working 12 on, 12 off, a great way to speed up the day-to-day, a great way to speed up getting towards the next port visit, well, you have 12 hours off shift. Why not sleep 10 of it?
Port and starboard days. I don't miss those.
Well, it was better than the 8, 8, and 8 that you guys ran on the sub.
Oh, no. That's just it, though. Is there are times where I was port and starboard underway. That sucks. 8 on, 8 off, 8 on, 8 off, and you're still supposed to get other things done.
Yeah, that's just asking for sleep deprivation. But no, on the carrier, the port and starboard, the way it worked was days and nights, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. But it kind of sucked for the night shift guys, because when we would pull into port, their start of shift would change from 7 p.m. to 4 p.m. night shift always got the shaft on time changes like that. So when you look at different franchises, you do have commentaries. But here's something else to think of. How effective would cryostasis be?
In what aspect?
Longevity of the human body.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Philip Fry made it 1,000 years.
Yeah, but at the same time, that was quite literally a fast freeze. There's got to be more to it than that. Actually, this is where I'll give Chronicles of Riddick a nod in potential accuracy. They actually did a blood exchange setup to encourage that sort of sleep and stasis aspect, while not adding something that would be potentially damaging to your internal structure. Because what happens when you freeze a living cell?
You get ice crystals.
Yeah, and ice crystals rupture cell membranes. So a number of types of cryostasis is nothing more than we're going to put you to sleep before we kill you.
Pretty much.
I want you to think that you're going to wake up, but you're not really going to.
Yeah.
Multi Tom Tom is listing off all the movies and books he likes.
Yeah, and he's just giving more evidence for the Poe designation.
This is how you have a polite conversation. He even threw a "Shut up, Wesley" in there.
Did he really?
Yeah.
I just saw Ugly German Truth comment. Who was your CEO, Jared? Jellicoe?
No, jeez. Oh no.
Also, I have to say,
Jell-
with cryostasis, as long as I don't go to sleep and then come out and find Taco Bell as a 5-star restaurant, life will be good.
yeah. Well, although, yeah, Jellicoe does get a bad rap. Jellicoe is actually like a lot of commanders in the military, so he wasn't far off. Granted, his diplomacy tactics were a bit rushed.
So LRJ88 has a good point. What you could do is to create a massive gravitational field to affect your local space-time in such a way that time passes slower than the surrounding space. Absolutely. And, the American populace has mastered that attempt because we're all fat bastards.
And a number of them have ideas that are stuck in the dark ages, at least societally.
There's no better way to stop time than through eating another burger and stopping your heart.
Oh, I thought it was going through and sitting through an impeachment hearing.
I was only there for an hour.
yes, but how long was
How did
that?
that hour feel to you?
It was exciting. It was exciting just to be there. I just wish I could have kept the ticket.
Should have taken a picture of it.
I did.
Well, then at least you have something.
Yeah, I do. If it keeps going on next week, maybe I'll see if I can get back in.
Dude, you gotta push the red button. That'll get you back in.
I got to do State of the Union next week. That'll be fun.
Oh, that is coming up.
Yeah. My Tuesday night will be long.
Yeah, I'm not going to watch it.
I'll be standing outside of it.
And grumbling about every little thing about it.
I disagree. I think his leadership skills were superb. He kept the crew hating him rather than pining on about Picard up to the point where he could stage a rescue. I think people don't really get what Jellicoe was doing. That's a fair point.
Well, yeah. No, it entirely is. And that's where... when you really look at it, the best leaders are the ones who actually are able to rally the troops in a way like that without them realizing it. Another good example of, what was it? Was it the Hurt Locker? There was a particular first sergeant in a newer movie, where he would constantly rail about the grooming standards. And there was some bad news that was coming down the pike, and he recognized this and is like, well, rather than piss off the men with that news, I'll give them something else to be pissed off about. And that's what he was. That's really the main reason why he was doing that, was rather than let them wallow in the misery of the shit that they were quite literally dealing with, I'll give them something else to bitch about so they're not complaining about that other nonsense. And then actually it ends up being a team building event.
Yeah, we kind of went through a similar change with the main store's management team several years ago when I actually worked in the main store. We had a management team that actually was everybody's friend, you know. Things were getting done, things were being handled, but then corporate's like, you know what, let's shake things up and start sending store managers to different stores and swapping them out. Well, the new store manager came in and she kind of laid down some ground rules really quick. And people did not like it. They were all, I miss so-and-so. And it's like, well, tough shit. You got to suck it up and deal with who you have. But you don't understand. So-and-so is so much better. I'm like, Sorry. Doesn't matter.
So, on a totally separate rant but leadership question, Captain Sobel was a fucking asshole.
But
But didn't he force his men to work together in their hatred of him? And how many more might have survived because of the more intense training?
well, yeah, exactly. When you look at things like that, Sobel was a great commander for training to go to war. He wouldn't have been as good of a commander in country, in theater, but getting the company ready to go, he was exactly what they needed. Push him hard, push him often, set a high standard and hold them to it, and that made
set
it
a
easier.
possibly unrealistic high standard.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where wait. Yes. See, and that is a thing, is because Band of Brothers, I would classify that as historical fiction.
Yeah.
Because at least the TV series. Because while it was based on the manuscript from and it was based on the story of Easy Company in the European theater and the lead up to it, there were bits that were probably exaggerated a little bit. So,
Dick Winters still deserved a Medal of Honor.
yes. Well, in the aggregate, yes, but the question is, what individual... Well, I guess the one individual moment that I could see, at least as was portrayed in the series, that would go towards it, would be the work that he did with Blythe. Which actually, the story about him... Blythe was the trooper who had a problem with combat fatigue, and actually there was a firefight where he was overstressed and couldn't respond, and you have Winter standing there on the berm, literally right above him, urging him on to keep firing and to reload and keep firing, as Winters himself is right there firing right alongside him.
There's a bunch of things I think Winters could have earned for, and you don't necessarily have to go for a single act, because I mean, shit, why can't I think of his name?
Are you talking about the one who?
Admiral that got booted out of Korea.
Oh,
that Admiral
MacArthur.
MacArthur got one for entirety of service, not for single action.
Yeah. Yeah, and with a reference like that, you can definitely see where what we have to go off of, Winters would have been deserving of it. And I do not see a reason not to. It's just interesting how different ways of dealing with those time frames and those stories are actually handled.
Okay, here's a controversial topic to get us back on the track. You can pick one captain to give a Medal of Honor to. Who and why? That might be a sit and think on it and come back to it next time.
No, but not necessarily, because this is actually an interesting one, because first is going through the list of captains that would be eligible. And then part of me wants to go with Harriman for one reason. To get people
here on Tuesday.
To get people to go, who the fuck are you talking about?
Sorry, I didn't mean to spoil it for you.
I know, but when you think about it, when you think back of actual known captains that to give an award like that to, who comes to mind? Well, you have your mainstays, for all her faults and questionable judgment decisions, you Janeway would be in the running. Kirk is in the running. Sisko is in the running. Picard, I would say Picard would be a fringe one, but the one that people would gloss over and not think of was actually a one that I would legitimately give it to that has already been mentioned in chat, and Ugly German Truce is right there with me on it. Garrett, the captain of the Enterprise C.
You just want to see Fraser get something for a change.
No, that was... He was...
Oh, no, that was the boatman. Never mind.
Yeah, he was the captain of the Bozeman.
Oh, yeah. I Garrett, yeah. I could see that.
I'm thinking whole picture Janeway. Because of the enormity of what she did for the entire crew.
And when you consider the situation, how many of the original crew and the crew of the Equinox, she managed to get them back.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, if Janeway had just been a standard Starfleet captain flying around the quadrant, I don't think she would have won it. But she pulled it through. Kirk and Picard, great captains, but I don't know if there's any single individual act I would follow them both to war. But I think it would be easier to write up the request for Janeway.
Yeah.
Okay. Not that I think that this would warrant it, but what about Archer during the Xindi conflict? I mean, that would be that to me. That's more of a fringe.
Pre-Federation, but still worthy of inclusion.
Yeah.
I mean, him and Janeway's story is very similar. You know, a lot of questionable things when you don't have the ability to contact for guidance.
And Ugly German Truth asks, killing God is not an individual act you can get behind? Yes, because he did it about 2,000 years too late.
Oh, wouldn't that have been 8,000 years too late?
Something like that.
Yeah. Now, you could argue for Kirk because of what we talked about earlier in the show, the fourth movie.
Yeah.
You could easily argue a Medal of Honor for that.
Yeah.
And you could also argue the same thing for Picard for First Contact.
Yeah, and that's where...
True.
And Nemesis. And Insurrection. And Generations.
And Farpoint.
Well, every time you have to deal with Q, you should get a Medal of Honor for that, so...
Well, then look at Sisko. Sisko actually literally took a swipe and landed. You hit
That's
me.
Medal of Honor enough right there.
You hit me. Picard never hit me. I'm not Picard. But then...
Oh, Ugly German Truth, George Kirk, but he wasn't captain of the Kelvin.
He was...
For 15 minutes.
First or second officer, yeah. According in the Kelvin timeline. Now, here's a deviation. In the Kelvin timeline, that is what Pike challenged James with. Is your father was captain of a starship for 15 minutes. I dare you to do better. But when you actually look at the original series and references made there. Kirk's father had a longer career in the actual Prime timeline, and Kirk also had an actual brother that was a part of his life as well. Not so much in the Kelvin timeline. You know,
Decker unit.
Decker would be an interesting one, because technically
That
for a
would
time
definitely be
he
a
was
posthumous one.
no, not posthumous, because he was only listed as missing in action.
Oh, that's true. So an absentee.
Yeah, it would be given in absentia, but at the same time, how many people have thought that that was part of the origin story for the Borg?
Yeah, do you really deserve a Medal of Honor for helping create the Borg?
Well, but there's talk about how V'ger was picked up by the Borg and then sent back. So I mean, did he really create the Borg?
Might not have created the Borg, but he told the Borg where we were. Well, no, V'ger did.
S2000 GT, Captain Proton, for doing stuff in black and white.
Well, luckily German Schutz got it too. Decker's on a long-term deployment.
A
Is he still
long-term
getting a
TAD.
paycheck?
Yeah, you know? Well, they do, but don't, but do, but don't, but do, but don't have money in the 23rd and 24th century.
It depends on when you need it or if you don't.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's socialist capitalism.
All right, well, I got to get going pretty soon. So I didn't know how much you guys had left before we start wrapping up. We're almost at 2 hours.
Yeah, no, it's definitely time to wrap up and get towards dinner. Well, for those of us in the proper time zone. Proper time zone and proper timeline.
Yeah.
Which... Okay, we will end it on this thought. We have all seen both episodes that have been released of Picard so far. What expectations do you have of the series being able to redeem some of the questionable points that have already been brought up? Jay?
I'm still trying to grasp my head about this being in the Discovery timeline with the Enterprise timeline and trying to make sense of all that as an alternate to the Hobos event that happened in the Prime timeline. That timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff. Yeah.
But what is
No, in
your
all
hope of
seriousness,
it
though,
going forward?
It's one of those. I think in order for it to be better than Discovery, it needs the plot needs to become more aware. We need to become more aware of what the true plot is, not this wishy-washy. Here's the bad guys, the Tal Shiar hunting down these girls, and really start bringing in what the actual plot is supposed to be. It's just they're setting it up so slowly, and I just have a feeling it's to pull the rug out from under us later to just tell us they had nothing.
That's my fear as well. I don't want to prejudge. I want to get at least 4 or 5 episodes in, once the plot gets a little thicker, to see if they're able to pull this together. I mean, it's intriguing to try and pull off. I would really, really like for them to nail down concretely which timeline they're living in at some point this season.
Well, I went into the talk about Picard being 50-50 on it being enjoyable and watchable and a return to more proper Trek. You're on the clock, CBS, because here we are, an hour and a half into on-screen material, and your main characters have yet to actually trek. You might want to consider getting to the actual story and actually get things moving. And also returning to what Star Trek was actually best at, which was taking a societal topic and addressing it in an episodic nature and limiting your overarching storylines that would span multiple episodes unless there was an actual reason to. Like
But
the
that's the
Dominion War.
Yeah. That's the question, Jared, though. Is this a limited series? Because there are a lot of series that are coming out right now that are dedicating to 1, 2, 3 seasons. That's it. We're telling a story and then we're done. So I can accept that. I that's an honorable thing to try and do, to tell a specific story. This isn't your grandpa's Star Trek. I don't know if we're going to get that episodic nature of it. It might not be a single story for 1 season or 2 seasons, but I don't know if we can hold it to the same standard of older series where we're going to have some storyline and then some fun stuff and then some storyline and then some fun stuff. This might just be one story.
And if that's the case, then don't call it an entire show. Call it a mini series. Call it something more appropriate for what it is. And there is one reminder that we have to make here. One reminder that I know is not coming just from me, but the execs at CBS who are in charge of this particular IP, this particular intellectual property, you need a reminder of something. There's a reason why the Orville has been so much more popular and accepted than your work has been so far over the past couple years.
Hands down.
And with that, I'm going to go get some dinner ready, get some stuff going, and catch up on other stuff. And just remember, we are going to be back here at 1600 Eastern on Saturday in 2 weeks. Until then, everyone, stay safe, have fun. If you have any other thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, feel free to jump into the Discord and go to the Kanar with Damar segment and let your voice be heard. And as long as you're not a rude asshat, you can say whatever you like. Good night, everyone.
Later.